Pregnant wife visits husband's office, sees millionaire husband kissing governor's daughter. Welcome, dear viewers, to a tale brimming with suspense, betrayal, and shocking revelations. Today, we delve into the dramatic world of a young wife, soon to be a mother, whose life takes a harrowing turn the moment she steps into her millionaire husband's office. Imagine the heartbreak of discovering a secret that threatens not only her marriage but also unravels the tangled web of political ambition. Our story is packed with twists you'll never see coming: lies, blackmail, hidden agendas, and a dose of karmic retribution that will leave you breathless. Brace yourselves for heartbreak and redemption as we unravel a saga unlike anything you've heard before. Before we dive in, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. If you're excited about this story, let us know. If you enjoyed the video, press 1. If not, press O. Your feedback really inspires me to gather more uplifting and meaningful stories. Elena tried not to feel queasy as she guided her car through the city's swirling traffic that sunny afternoon. Her pregnancy, now 6 months along, had intensified her sense of caution. Yet it was more than just her baby's health making her nervous. There was something odd about her husband Charles's behavior over the past few weeks. He was a millionaire real estate mogul, accustomed to a high-stakes world, but the change Elena had noticed felt deeper than typical work stress. Charles usually loved sharing every detail of his day with her, from new property acquisitions to boisterous boardroom politics. Lately, he had grown distant, returning home late with vague excuses and fleeting phone conversations. With her hand resting protectively over her growing belly, Elena resolved to break the cycle of secrecy by surprising him at his office. She had hoped the gesture would rekindle his warmth, but as she parked in front of the gleaming skyscraper bearing their family name, her stomach churned with foreboding. Little did she know that what she would soon witness, just beyond those polished glass doors, would change her life in unimaginable ways. Stepping into the luxurious lobby, Elena found the usual buzz of the staff replaced by strained silence. The receptionist, a young woman dressed in a crisp blouse, looked startled to see her. Elena, carrying a small container of Charles's favorite homemade lunch, offered a friendly smile, trying to mask her uncertainty. Instantly, the receptionist, a woman named Camille, averted her eyes. Something seemed off. Elena sensed the hush among the onlookers, and her heart pounded as if it too recognized the unspoken tension. Taking the private elevator, Elena's thoughts raced. She recalled a cryptic conversation she'd overheard between Charles and an unknown caller the previous night. There were mentions of the governor's demands, hush money, and a property deal that threatened Charles's reputation. Yet Charles had never once mentioned negotiating with any politician, much less anyone as influential as Governor Samuel. Before Elena could piece together the puzzle, the elevator doors slid open onto the top floor, and she stepped out, unprepared for the storm waiting just around the corner. The familiar polished granite of Charles's office corridor glimmered beneath the bright overhead lights. Exquisite paintings, carefully curated by Charles over the years, lined the walls. Elena had always found comfort in these opulent surroundings, symbols of a life built from the ground up through Charles's ambition and her unwavering support. She approached the imposing mahogany doors leading to Charles's private suite. From behind them, muffled voices drifted out, too hushed for Elena to distinguish any words. Then, a sudden peal of laughter echoed feminine, poised, yet disturbingly smug. Elena paused, her heart skipping a beat. Tentatively, she eased the door open a crack. The sight that greeted her sent shockwaves through her entire being. Charles, her devoted husband of 4 years, was wrapped in an embrace, locked in a passionate kiss with none other than Governor Samuel's daughter, Margaret. Dressed in a sleek red suit, Margaret looked every bit the high society heiress, her manicured nails digging into Charles's shoulders. Elena's lunch container slipped from her trembling fingers, crashing to the floor in a dissonant clang that shattered the silence, along with her illusions of marital bliss. Charles jolted away from Margaret, his horrified gaze locking with Elena's tear-filled eyes. The tension in the room was thick enough to slice with a blade. Margaret, far from apologetic, offered Elena a provocative smirk. Elena's immediate impulse was to collapse to her knees and sob uncontrollably, but she could feel anger surging through her veins like molten lava. Her hands instinctively flew to her belly, her maternal instincts raging against the betrayal. Charles rushed forward to stammer feeble explanations. He insisted it was a misunderstanding, a momentary lapse, but Margaret's smug expression told a different story. There was a predatory gleam in the heiress's eyes that intimated a twisted agenda. With trembling lips and flushed cheeks, Elena gathered enough composure to storm out before Charles could restrain her. The last thing she glimpsed was Margaret leaning casually against Charles's desk, rolling her eyes at the spectacle. Elena felt as if her world had been turned inside out, uncertain that her once peaceful life could ever be set right again. Elena fled down the hallway, tears streaming, ignoring the astonished glances from employees. But she barely reached the elevator before she stumbled to a stop. Her pounding heart stuttered in alarm, and her breath came in ragged gasps. Concerned staff rushed to her side, offering water and anxious inquiries, but Elena couldn't form coherent words. All she could picture was that image of Charles and Margaret, so intimate, so deceitful. Suddenly, Charles appeared, almost knocking people aside as he sprinted toward his wife. Desperate panic was etched into his features. He pleaded for a private moment to explain. With tears still burning her cheeks, Elena agreed, her mind still spinning from the shock. Charles led her into an empty conference room, away from prying eyes. There, with trembling sincerity, he begged her to hear him out. He claimed that Margaret had orchestrated the kiss, using her father's political power to corner him into a lucrative deal. He insisted he was powerless against her demands. Though Elena sensed a kernel of truth in his words, his tension over the past few weeks now made sense. She still wrestled with betrayal. The question of who to believe weighed heavily on her shoulders: her unborn child's father, or the incriminating evidence she had just witnessed herself. In the days that followed, Elena moved out of their sprawling penthouse and sought refuge in a modest suite at a nearby hotel. She needed space to think, away from Charles's pleas, away from the questions swirling in her mind. He called day and night, leaving voicemails that alternated between abject apologies and frantic explanations. According to him, Governor Samuel had threatened to shut down Charles's latest real estate development unless Charles complied with certain demands, which included forging a scandalous engagement with Margaret to publicly legitimize her image and distract from the governor's corruption allegations. Margaret's father was no stranger to controversy. Rumors of money laundering and shady land deals abounded. However, no formal charges had stuck yet. Charles swore he had only wanted to protect his business empire, her future, and the future of their unborn child. But Elena couldn't shake the visceral memory of that kiss. Had he sacrificed their sacred bond under political pressure, or was there something more something he still wasn't telling her? One lonely evening, Elena found herself lying awake in the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. Her mind replayed the moment in Charles's office like a never-ending reel. Desperate for clarity, she decided to confront an ally within her husband's circle, someone who owed her nothing but honesty. She remembered meeting a senior accountant, Lewis, at one of Charles's corporate galas. He was reserved, but she sensed he took pride in ethical work. Summoning her courage, she visited Lewis at his private residence, mindful of confidentiality. She was met by a kind man who appeared nervous about revealing internal company secrets. Over tea, Lewis admitted that Governor Samuel and Margaret had exerted formidable pressure on Charles. They'd staked his entire fortune on compliance, hinting at financial ruin. Moreover, they wielded social blackmail, threatening to fabricate scandalous rumors about Elena herself. If Charles didn't keep up a convincing public romance with Margaret, the governor would sabotage his empire. Elena's heart twisted, partly in empathy for Charles's predicament and partly in horror at the depth of manipulation. Yet, in Lewis's eyes, she saw a flicker of something else, a nuance that suggested a hidden layer to the story. The next day, Elena cautiously met Charles at a discreet cafe. She wanted to gauge his sincerity without the distraction of opulence or staff. Charles arrived, looking exhausted, dark circles beneath his eyes, as though he hadn't slept in days. Before she could speak, Charles confessed everything about his arrangement with Margaret, how she had cornered him at a political fundraiser, slipping her phone number into his jacket pocket under her father's watchful stare. How the governor had threatened to revoke Charles's building permits unless he cooperated. He swore on their unborn child that the kiss Elena witnessed was part of Margaret's manipulative plan to generate scandalous headlines, forcing the public to see them as a couple. His voice trembled with frustration as he explained he'd been planning a covert strategy to extricate himself from their clutches. Charles further admitted that a portion of the blame lay with him. He'd quietly sought the governor's favor to secure prime real estate, inadvertently giving the governor leverage to blackmail him. Elena listened intently, torn between anger, betrayal, and a swelling tide of compassion. Yet the question loomed, had Charles truly never felt anything for Margaret, or was that too another half-truth? In the midst of this heartbreak, Elena unearthed her own willpower. She refused to be a pawn in Margaret and Governor Samuel's game. She proposed a plan, gather damning evidence of the governor's corruption, and end this twisted arrangement once and for all. Charles, desperate to make amends, was quick to agree. Together, they hatched a plan to infiltrate Margaret's upcoming charity gala, an event set to benefit an organization close to Governor Samuel's heart. The gala promised a star-studded guest list, from business moguls to state senators, making it the perfect stage for secrets to be revealed. Charles managed to secure an invitation for himself and, surprisingly, for Elena as well. On the night of the event, Elena would pose as the gracious, forgiving wife who wanted to support her husband's philanthropic efforts. Meanwhile, Charles, from behind the scenes, would coordinate with Lewis, who had compiled incriminating documents hinting at the governor's misuse of campaign funds. If they played their cards right, they could expose the governor's wrongdoing in front of the city's elite. The real question was whether Margaret, cunning as a fox, would spot the trap before it snapped shut. The grand ballroom of the Renaissance Hotel dazzled with crystal chandeliers and opulent floral arrangements. Guests filtered in, dressed to the nines, their conversations teeming with the usual superficial politeness that characterized high society gatherings. Elena glided into the room, her elegant gown artfully concealing her pregnancy from immediate notice, at least from a distance. Though her heart pounded, she maintained a serene smile. Margaret's eyes immediately locked onto Elena the moment she entered. The governor's daughter was resplendent in a figure-hugging evening dress, her posture exuding arrogance. She wasted no time striding across the ballroom and planting herself in front of Elena. With a sly grin, she welcomed her friend to the gala, subtly reminding Elena of the stolen kiss. As she walked away, Margaret added under her breath, "Try not to stress yourself or the baby." It would be such a shame if Charles found himself alone. The implied threat rattled Elena to her core, but if anything, it bolstered her resolve to dismantle the governor's hold once and for all. Charles soon joined Elena, gently placing a protective hand on her lower back. He had been entertaining local dignitaries, no doubt spinning tales of his philanthropic aspirations. The tension was palpable as they mingled, exchanging pleasantries with guests who seemed blissfully unaware of the roiling drama beneath the surface. Across the room, Governor Samuel held court among a circle of influential figures, waving his arms theatrically as he boasted about recent policy successes. Watching him laugh with unshakable confidence, Elena felt a surge of determination. She discreetly pressed a small earpiece that connected her to Louis, who was stationed in a nearby van. They were ready to broadcast the governor's corruption if the chance presented itself. Little did they know, Margaret had been orchestrating her own plot behind the scenes. Through sly signals to staff and whispered conversations, she had set in motion a humiliating public stunt designed to ruin Charles if he dared not cooperate fully. And soon, that plan would make its grand appearance on the swanky gala stage. Right when the live band finished their first set, Margaret stepped up to the microphone, greeting the audience with a charming smile. She announced a surprise that would floor the philanthropic community. Instantly, Charles and Elena exchanged anxious glances. Margaret beckoned Charles forward, inviting him to join her on stage. "Tonight," she proclaimed, "I want to share news of a partnership, both business and personal." The crowd erupted in polite applause, a swirl of cameras flashing as Margaret pressed closer to Charles, who held a forced grin. Elena's heart pounded so fiercely she could barely stand. Sweat trickled down Charles's brow. He knew if he contradicted Margaret publicly, the governor's retribution might come crashing down. Yet he also understood that Elena was listening, ready to feed any slip of corruption into Louis's earpiece. After a dramatic pause, Margaret divulged that her father, the esteemed governor, had blessed a lucrative real estate alliance with Charles's firm. To Elena's shock, Margaret also insinuated a deeper connection, vague references to joining families, leaving the hungry press to speculate about an impending engagement. Elena felt faint, her hands trembling so violently that she had to clutch her purse for support. Sensing Margaret's final power play, Charles cleared his throat and addressed the gathering. Carefully, he steered the conversation toward charitable endeavors and community-driven development, sprinkling in praise for Governor Samuel's leadership. Despite the tension roiling within him, Charles had one mission: stall. He needed Margaret to let slip incriminating details about her father's behind-the-scenes maneuvering. From the corner of the room, Elena spotted a suspicious figure weaving through the throng, someone in a black suit, earpiece hidden under a collar. Was he security for the governor? Was he tailing them? Every hair on Elena's neck stood on end. Meanwhile, on stage, Margaret, buoyed by the crowd's rapt attention, launched into a monologue about philanthropic virtue. She mentioned vaguely how sometimes moral lines must be blurred for the greater good, inadvertently hinting at the corruption fueling her father's empire. Charles waited for the perfect moment to pounce, to invite her into a more concrete admission. But the figure in the black suit had moved closer. Elena realized with dawning horror that Margaret had likely dispatched someone to intercept any suspicious broadcast or recordings. Time was running short, and the net was tightening around them. Suddenly, Margaret made a fatal slip. In her quest to bask in the spotlight, she gleefully mentioned that her father's office kept certain politicians at bay to expedite land deals. In that moment, Charles shot a meaningful glance at Elena, who pressed her earpiece. Louis caught the phrase, and with a single keystroke, he broadcast a snippet of the governor's recorded phone calls in which Samuel openly boasted about using shell companies to funnel illicit money into real estate acquisitions. The audio crackled through hidden speakers, seizing the attention of the entire ballroom. Gasps rippled through the crowd as they recognized Governor Samuel's unmistakable voice bragging, By next quarter, we'll have that property under my daughter's name. No one will suspect a thing. For several heart-pounding seconds, the world seemed to stand still. Cameras snapped relentlessly, capturing the governor's stunned expression, Margaret's eyes wide with fury, and Charles's mixture of relief and apprehension. Even as the black-suited figure lunged toward the sound system to kill the feed, the damage was done. In one swift stroke, the carefully constructed facade of moral leadership around Governor Samuel crumbled, revealing a deep vein of corruption and underhanded dealings. What happened next was chaos. Reporters rushed forward, thrusting microphones toward Governor Samuel, demanding answers. Some guests muttered curses, while others scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. Margaret, realizing she'd been outmaneuvered, spun on Charles, her eyes glittering with hatred. She lunged at him, hurling baseless accusations about his personal life, his finances, anything to divert attention. Meanwhile, Elena slipped off stage, feeling a surge of relief so powerful it nearly brought her to tears. But her ordeal wasn't over yet. The man in black seized her arm, growling that she needed to come with him. With adrenaline pumping, Elena jerked free and darted through the panicked crowd. Security personnel swarmed the stage, attempting to restore order. Charles, too, broke away, calling after Elena. Outside, a dozen reporters circled, cameras pointed at the hotel entrance. Elena spotted Lewis's car across the street and ran for it, weaving between bystanders. Charles and Lewis quickly joined her. They roared off, just as Margaret and the black-suited henchman burst from the lobby doors, shouting obscenities after them. Though their hearts thundered, Elena and Charles shared a single triumphant thought. The governor's empire was finally under scrutiny. The fallout was instantaneous. Major news outlets replayed the incriminating audio clip, dissecting every word. Public outrage swelled, culminating in demands for Governor Samuel's resignation. Investigations were launched. Officials, once loyal to the governor, backed away, fearing they too would be implicated. Margaret's name was plastered across headlines, paired with furious editorials about unchecked political privilege. Meanwhile, Charles's businesses took a hit. Clients panicked at the mention of scandal. Yet, as the days progressed, a surprising twist emerged. Many recognized Charles had risked a fortune to blow the whistle. Suddenly, he was recast as an unwilling pawn turned moral whistleblower, and a wave of goodwill followed. Despite the crisis, new investors stepped forward, eager to support Charles's integrity. For Elena, life was still a tangled mess of conflicting emotions. She remained in the hotel suite, unsure whether to forgive Charles wholeheartedly. Each night, she wrestled with sleeplessness, the memory of Margaret's kiss haunting her dreams. Then, just as dawn was about to break one morning, she felt the baby's firm kick against her belly. In that moment, she resolved that while forgiveness might come slowly, she could no longer deny Charles's earnest attempts to rectify his mistakes. Driven by concern for her unborn child and a flicker of hope, Elena agreed to meet Charles at a small lakeside cabin they had once rented for an anniversary retreat. The idea was to temporarily escape the media frenzy and find a safe space to talk honestly, away from the city's relentless clamor. Charles arrived in his Bentley Mulsanne, a tangible reminder of the wealth he'd once leveraged for the governor's favor. He stepped out, a bouquet of lilies in hand, the faintest tremor betraying his anxiety. Elena could hardly recall seeing him so vulnerable. Under the cabin's wooden beams, Charles led her to a weathered bench by the shore. He confessed that he had initially entertained Margaret's flirtations to gain political advantage, but claimed he never intended for it to escalate into blackmail. He recognized his complicity in setting the stage for their downfall, but assured Elena that from the moment he realized the danger posed by Margaret and her father, he'd been searching for a way to protect Elena and the baby. His voice cracked with regret. Though Elena's anger had not disappeared, it softened under the sincerity of his words. And when he placed his hand gently over hers, a sense of tentative solace formed between them. Their quiet reconciliation at the cabin was interrupted by an unexpected twist. Late that night, Charles received a tip from a journalist contact. Governor Samuel had disappeared. The official statement claimed he had checked himself into a private hospital due to exhaustion, but rumors abounded that he was fleeing potential arrest. Worse yet, Margaret remained in the city, determined to claw back her family's once unassailable power. As Elena and Charles debated whether to remain at the cabin, a mysterious black SUV pulled up nearby, headlights piercing the darkness. Suspicion mounted immediately. Charles crept to a window and saw the silhouette of a woman stepping out. Alarm jolted through him when he recognized Margaret's regal posture. Bracing themselves, Elena and Charles crouched behind the furniture, uncertain what Margaret intended. The front door handle rattled, sending Elena's pulse racing. With a loud bang, the door flew open. Margaret stepped in, flanked by two men in suits, adrenaline surging in her cold eyes. It seemed their confrontation had come far sooner, and far more violently than either Charles or Elena had anticipated. Margaret wasted no time with pleasantries. She spotted Charles and Elena huddled behind the sofa and ordered her men to yank them to their feet. Her once poised demeanor had given way to raw fury. "You think you can just humiliate my father and walk away unscathed?" she hissed, slamming her fist onto the cabin's wooden table. Elena flinched, but Charles tried to interpose himself protectively. Margaret, seething, demanded that Charles publicly recant all accusations of corruption and shift blame onto a technical mishap. In exchange, she promised to remain silent about certain personal matters, that she threatened to leak lurid fabrications that could tarnish Charles's reputation and devastate Elena. For a heart-stopping moment, Charles stood there, his mind reeling. He was fully aware that giving in would not only destroy his credibility, but also betray Elena once again. On the other hand, defiance risked physical harm or worse. Elena, trembling, locked eyes with Charles. In that silent moment, an unspoken understanding passed between them. They would stand firm together. They refused to live under Margaret's suffocating control. Gathering his courage, Charles told Margaret that he would rather lose everything than become her puppet. His voice rang with a steadiness that shocked even himself. A menacing silence filled the room. Then, with a twisted smirk, Margaret signaled her henchmen. One yanked Charles backward, while the other advanced on Elena, towering over her visibly pregnant belly. Margaret's eyes held a cruel spark, daring Elena to protest. But in that dire instant, a sudden commotion exploded outside. Blinding headlights and the wail of sirens cut through the stillness. A voice on a megaphone commanded, "This is the police, stand down." Elena's heart soared at the sound. She realized that somewhere along the line, either Charles or Lewis must have alerted the authorities to Margaret's potential threat. With chaos erupting, Margaret's henchmen scrambled for cover, but a team of officers surged into the cabin, weapons drawn. Margaret shrieked in protest, cornered at last. Charles and Elena clutched each other, relief and shock flooding their systems as the authorities swiftly took Margaret into custody. It was a moment of karmic justice as the unstoppable tyrant found herself powerless before the law. In the aftermath, an investigation implicated Margaret in conspiracy, attempted coercion, and her father in multiple counts of political corruption. The story spread across every major news outlet, overshadowing even the most salacious celebrity gossip. Charles became a reluctant hero of sorts, his name cleared by the evidence he and Elena had helped uncover. The real estate mogul's reputation, though still bearing scars, found unexpected redemption in the public eye. A sense of poetic justice lingered in the air. Margaret, who had revelled in her high society status, was now likely to face serious legal consequences. Governor Samuel, still hidden in his private hospital, had no choice but to lawyer up, battling allegations that threatened to end his political career for good. Though Charles and Elena would forever carry the trauma of betrayal and danger, they relished the knowledge that their ordeal had helped unmask deep-seated corruption. Weeks turned into months, and Elena's pregnancy progressed peacefully at last. The couple decided to work through their marital challenges, not by sweeping everything under the rug, but by building an honest dialogue. They attended counseling sessions and spent hours discussing the future, their baby, and the importance of trust. Through these earnest efforts, Elena gradually forgave Charles. She recognized that while his decisions had been reckless and naive, he had faced unimaginable pressure from two powerful adversaries. Now that the governor and Margaret's machinations had crumbled, Elena and Charles finally felt a fragile sense of safety. And with that safety came a renewed devotion to one another and to the new life that would soon join their family. Late one evening, as they stood together on their penthouse balcony, gazing at the city lights, Charles slipped an arm around Elena's waist. He murmured vows to protect her and the baby, no matter the cost. She rested her head on his shoulder. Although their fairy tale had been tarnished, they were forging something more profound, a union tempered by trial and grounded in the truth. The day Elena gave birth was both radiant and tense. News of Governor Samuel's ongoing trial had saturated local media, overshadowed only by the sensational details of Margaret's legal battles. Yet for Charles and Elena, those concerns paled in comparison to welcoming their baby boy, Oliver, into the world. In the hospital suite, as Elena cradled her newborn, Charles knelt beside her, tears of joy streaming down his face. In that instant, all the heartbreak and turmoil they had endured felt distant. Their small, fragile bundle symbolized a fresh start, a chance to rewrite their story without the burden of secrets or the stain of betrayal. As the baby's cries quieted, Charles pressed a gentle kiss to Elena's forehead, silently promising to cherish what truly mattered. Not long after Oliver's birth, Charles faced a final test. With the governor no longer shielding them, a faction of corrupt business associates tried to topple Charles's reformed empire. They attempted to discredit him, launching smear campaigns, alleging that he, too, had colluded with dirty officials. Charles, however, had the advantage of transparency. With Lewis's help, he released every financial record, every email, and every trace of evidence showing he had been coerced into the governor's schemes. Seeing the truth laid bare, the public rallied behind Charles, condemning those who persisted in tarnishing a man who had risked ruin to expose corruption. This resolute commitment to honesty signaled a renaissance for Charles's business. Loyal clients multiplied, offering Charles the chance to build ethical projects that truly benefited communities. While the road ahead would never be devoid of hurdles, Charles and Elena saw it as an opportunity to fortify their relationship and guard their family against future adversity. Meanwhile, legal proceedings churned on for Margaret and Governor Samuel. Investigations revealed decades of bribes, backdoor deals, and intimidation tactics. Margaret ultimately struck a plea deal, turning evidence against her father in hopes of reducing her own sentence. The lavish lifestyle she once flaunted evaporated, replaced by court appearances and mounting legal fees. Some speculated that even prison time loomed on the horizon. A sense of karmic retribution lingered over these events. Though it had taken heartbreak and betrayal to reach this point, The wrongdoing of the father-daughter duo was finally exposed to the world. Elena and Charles continued to follow the headlines, never forgetting the nights of fear, the threats, the moment Elena discovered Charles in Margaret's arms. Yet rather than sinking into bitterness, they harnessed those memories as a testament to resilience, proof that they had confronted darkness and emerged stronger. At last, the day of Governor Samuel's sentencing arrived. Cameras once again lined the courthouse steps. Charles and Elena didn't attend in person. They had chosen to remain at home, cherishing quiet moments with Oliver. They watched the live coverage as the governor, once powerful and untouchable, was led into the courtroom. Despite a flurry of expensive lawyers, the verdict was damning, convictions on multiple felony counts of corruption. Margaret's testimony had sealed his fate. As the judge handed down a sentence, the governor's face was a haunted mask. No matter how many times Elena blinked, she could hardly believe that the man who once manipulated her husband's every move was now destined for prison. A cautious relief settled over them. Charles turned to Elena, the baby curled against his chest, and mouthed, "We're free." Tears slid down Elena's cheeks, not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude that fate had ultimately steered them toward justice. Their story had not gone as planned, but in that sacred moment of closure, they sensed a collective heartbeat of renewal for their city, for their family, and for the promise that truth and resilience always had the final say. Thank you for joining us on this thrilling journey of lies, betrayal, and redemption. Elena's heart-wrenching discovery led to one of the most harrowing battles of her life, and yet she found the strength to protect her family, uphold the truth, and claim justice in the end. As Governor Samuel and Margaret faced the consequences of their own greed, Elena and Charles forged a bond stronger than ever, proven by fire and ready to embrace a hopeful future. If you enjoyed watching this dramatic saga unfold, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more captivating stories. Your support helps us continue sharing unforgettable tales.